Alan approached the boulder, stepping on it to test its stability. It felt solid, so he braced himself, pressing all four limbs against the rock walls on either side, trying to lower himself down. But in an instant, his right hand jammed beneath a massive stone. Staring at his trapped hand, Alan couldn't fathom what had just happened. By the time he registered it, he was stuck at the bottom of the canyon. He pulled with all his strength, but the rock wouldn't budge. Instead, his arm wedged tighter, sending waves of pain shooting through him. He tried prying it loose with his left hand, gritting his teeth, but the boulder remained immovable. He kicked it, rammed it with his shoulder, used his body weight to push every trick he could think of, but the stone stayed rooted, not shifting an inch. Exhausted, he wanted to rest, but the pressure was crushing his bones, the pain pulsing relentlessly. In despair, he shouted for help, but there was no one around. He was utterly alone. He checked his backpack, a climbing rope, a DV camera, a watch, a folding knife, half a bottle of water. Right then, the knife seemed his best hope. He started chipping at the rock wall, but his hand quickly grew tired. After hours of effort, he'd only scraped off tiny fragments of stone. Then, suddenly, the knife slipped, falling into a crack in the ground. Alan bent to retrieve it, but it was out of reach. He took off his sock, gripped a twig with his toes, and fished the knife back up. It was dull now, but he had no choice but to keep going. From day to night, Alan was parched. He hadn't had a drop of water. Carefully, he twisted open the bottle, took a tiny sip, and held it in his mouth, savoring every drop. His legs, strained from standing so long, were ready to give out. He needed a plan. He took out the climbing rope and threw it upward, again and again. After dozens of tries, it finally caught on a protruding rock. He tied the other end around his waist, shifting some of his weight. At last, he could rest for a moment. The next morning, he pricked his finger with the knife. No feeling. The cells in his hand were completely dead. He gave up chiseling the wall. The blade was worn out, and the rock hadn't changed. Night fell again. This time, he tied everything he had around himself to stay warm. He opened his last bag of bread, eating it slowly, bite by bite. He couldn't help but drink a little more water to avoid dehydration. He didn't even dare to pee. Half asleep, half awake, he survived another night. On the third day, he wrapped the climbing rope around the boulder several times, using hands and feet to pull it tight. He connected the top rope with a safety buckle, making a crude pulley system. But no matter how he pulled, with his hand, by stepping on the rope, using his bodice momentum, the rock wouldn't move. It was all in vain. He reflected. The pulley failed because the rope stretched too much. The knife couldn't cut the wall. This only made the trap worse. Now, he faced the worst possibility. He pulled the rubber sleeve from the water hose. It made a passable tourniquet. He wrapped it around his arm, tightening it little by little with the safety buckle. He'd made up his mind. He was going to let go of this arm,